Welcome to our Marriage in Quarantine experience. I'm so excited that you're joining us. We're going to have 4 weeks of experiences where you're going to be able to focus in on your marriage. The whole goal of these is to encourage couples to take some time out to really have some intentional conversations and intentional experiences. Intentional is the word that I want you to focus in on, guys, because oftentimes in life we can just become really busy and we just get into a rut of just living it out and we forget to be intentional. And when we forget to be intentional for our marriage, whether that's communication, healthy conflict, whether that's intentional intimacy, then we sometimes lose that connection with our spouse that we need to have. And I'll tell you that during this quarantine time, marriages have struggled. I've talked to some different people whose marriages have really been challenged by being stuck at home, by the stress of finances, by the stress of kids. It wears on you, and sometimes when that happens, we get even more in a rut. So what I want to encourage you to do is just choose these next 4 weeks, sometime over the weekend, to say we're committed to watching the short video that Casey's doing, and we're committed to talking about the questions that she's going to give us. I even have a PowerPoint presentation on this website that you can read through that kind of goes back over what I'm talking about, if you just want to look through that. But these talks are short, so I hope that you'll listen to them, and I hope you'll take time to just really focus in. Even if you just give yourself 30 minutes to an hour. If you can give yourself more time, I would love for you to take more time with your spouse. But the questions shouldn't take that long, but if you even can put a dinner in there without kids, or some just sitting outside and talking together, that would be awesome. So today we're going to talk about communication. How it's set up is this week we're going to talk about communication, which is really the stepping stone for anything else we talk about, because if we can't communicate well, then that's going to affect everything else we do. So next week we're going to do conflict resolution. The week after that we'll be talking about sex and intimacy, and then the last week we will talk about balance. Balance through time together, time apart, what you need, what you don't need. And as I've said, I know that in quarantine, things have changed. And that's kind of what we're going to be working on today and throughout these next 4 weeks, is being able to say, okay, let's just have a check back in. Let's regroup as a couple, and let's just kind of see where we're at after being stuck inside for 3 to 4 months under a little bit of a heavy a cloud of fear a little bit for coronavirus, and trying to keep our children and our spouses and our grandparents and our parents safe, and then try to still keep a job and provide for our families, the financial stresses. There's so many things that have weighed on us over these past few months, and so those definitely do affect a marriage. And so what I wanted to do was just to give you a little check-in. That's pretty much what we're doing. So today we're doing a little bit of a check-in on communication. Some of you who have ever heard me talk about marriage issues have heard me talk about communication. So some of this might be repetitive, but I truly believe that all of us need a re-check-in when it comes to being repetitive, when it comes to communication and marriage things, because we oftentimes know what to do but don't always put it into practice. And so today, hopefully this will be a good refresher for some of you, and for others of you, it'll be new content. A lot of the content that I get comes from Prepare and Rich, which is a great program that does a lot for marriage and premarital, and they have great tools. So I'm just going to teach you and talk about one of those today. We're going to talk about communication. And scripturally, communication is important. In James 1:19, it says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. This is huge when we're talking about communication, and when we're talking about what I'm going to talk about today, because all of us know how to talk. By all means, we can talk like crazy, but not all of us know how to listen well. And so what we're going to talk about today is, yes, definitely how to speak, but also how to listen well. I'm a communication major, and I tell you, I didn't learn that in college. Nobody ever taught me how to communicate well when it comes to having a conversation with somebody. And I think none of us really got that. So this is important to learn if you're going to be in a marriage where you're going to feel like both people have an equal say and both people are heard. So that's what we're going to focus in on today. what we're going to do is talk about assertiveness. We're going to encourage you to be assertive. Being assertive means being able to ask for what you want and need. Some people naturally are assertive. They're just those people who can just say what they want. They're blunt, they're outspoken, and that is awesome. And some people aren't. They have a really hard time. They kind of stuff it in. They kind of hold it in until it blows up, or until they just decide, I can get over that, and they move past it. Sometimes it's some passive aggressiveness comes out in that, or resentment comes out in that, or they feel controlled by their spouse because they're not telling their spouse what they want and need, and so their spouse doesn't know it because they can't read your mind. So an important part of healthy communication is being able to express what you want and need. So we call that being assertive. This is huge. And what's interesting is sometimes when somebody is really assertive, they don't even realize when their spouse is not. They just kind of go along with life and don't realize that their spouse is feeling controlled, that their spouse feels like they're never heard. And it's not anyone's fault per se, but it is something that has to be changed. So during our time as you talk with your spouse, y'all are going to talk about it. Do you feel like you express yourself? Do you tell your spouse what you want and need? And there's some of you who are going to say, no, I feel like I hold that in a lot. I feel like I'm uncomfortable. I feel like I have a really hard time doing that with you. I feel like I have a hard time doing that with other people. My encouragement to you is, or at least to the spouse who isn't the one who has a hard time being assertive, my encouragement to you is to encourage your spouse to say what they think and feel. When you ask them what they think and feel and they say, oh, I don't care, it's whatever, say, no, I really want to know. How do you feel about this? No, I really want to know. What do you want to do? What is your opinion? You're going to have to pull it out of them sometimes, but I'm going to challenge you to do that. Because it will go a long ways. And once your spouse begins to become more assertive, it'll start becoming more natural and it'll flow, and you'll find that it will open up a whole new world for your marriage. But for now, I just want to encourage you to work on this practice of what I'm going to show you. And as you work on these tools, it's going to help you to become more assertive, and it's going to help you to become a much better listener. We're going to call that active listening. The active listening is being able to listen to what your spouse says and being able to repeat that back to them. That sounds kind of crazy. I've heard some people say, I just feel weird when I'm doing that. But I'll tell you, it can go a long ways to make sure you're not miscommunicating with each other. It can go a long ways to make sure your spouse feels like they've heard, that you've heard them and that you really cared about what they had to say. It's important. So what I want to do is I want to encourage you to become an active listener. What happens oftentimes in communication is when somebody is talking to us, instead of us actively listening, what we're doing is we're coming up with a response to what they're saying. I mean, how many times have you done that? You've heard like 2 or 3 words out of someone's mouth and you've already assumed you know everything else they're about to say, and so you're already thinking about what you're going to say back. And sometimes by doing that, you miss the whole point. You just made an assumption that wasn't true. And then y'all digress down into an argument that might have been helped and might have even been stopped if you had just listened well and been able to repeat what your spouse said. So those are the 2 skills that we're going to work on today. Here's how you're going to do it. The thing is, some people are quite assertive. Some of us women love to talk, so we're going to tell you everything we feel and want and need. The problem is, sometimes when we do that, we talk a lot. We'll say, an example, yes, you know, it was really upsetting to me when you told the kids that they could go do this, but you didn't tell me that you were doing that. And then when I asked about it, I felt like you didn't care. And you know, last week, that happened again at that time when our kids were doing blah, 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 and you did this. And you can see my point. It digresses into maybe a 10, 15, 20-minute talk where you're just talking and your spouse is standing there checked out long before you got to your point. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to be concise. So being assertive also means learning how to be concise. So you actually have to think about what you're going to say before you say it, because what I want you to do is give it in a sentence or 2. Because who can repeat more than a sentence or 2? So what you're going to do is you're going to say what you need or want, and I'm going to encourage you to give a feeling with that. Because when you give a feeling with a need or want, it's more likely that your spouse is going to take you seriously and actually care about what you have to say. So an example is, if you said to your spouse, you know, I really feel like, well, I need you to not be so critical of me in front of other people. It makes me feel really bad about myself. You know, when a spouse hears that they have made you feel really bad about yourself, they're going to hopefully clue in a little bit more and say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I did that, and I don't ever want to make you feel that way. So to give a feeling word is important. So I want to encourage you to make a statement. I need, I want, and here's a feeling that I experience because of this. After you make that statement, 1 to 2 sentences, your spouse should be able to repeat that to you. So if I was a spouse, I'd say, I hear you saying that when we were out with people and I made that comment, it upset you and made you feel bad about yourself. And then the spouse would say, yes, that's what I meant. That's what I said. Every once in a while, though, you'll say something and your spouse will hear something else and say it back to you, and you'll be like, oh, wait a minute. That's not what I meant, or that's not what I said. I was in a counseling session once with a couple where the wife said, she said, I need you to not play golf every weekend because it makes the kids and I feel like you don't want to spend time with us and that we're not important. So the spouse says, I hear you saying you don't want me to play golf anymore on the weekends because it makes you and the kids feel like I don't want to spend time with you. And she's able to say, no, that's not what I said. That's not what I meant. Here's what I meant. Let me repeat it again. She said, I wish that you wouldn't play golf every weekend because it makes me and the kids feel like you don't want to spend time with us. And then he's able to say, okay, so you don't want me to play golf every weekend because it makes you and the kids feel like I don't want to spend time with you. Do you hear the big difference? Every weekend. So imagine if he had walked away, not repeating it, and they were standing in their kitchen chatting, and she just made the statement, you know, babe, I just really wish you wouldn't play golf every weekend. It makes me and the kids feel like you don't want to spend time with us. And he goes, okay, and he walks off. A month from now, 6 weeks from now, 2 months from now, he's not playing golf at all, and she's liking it at first, and then he starts getting kind of snappy and resentful, and you're like, what is going on? Why, number one, why isn't he playing golf at all anymore? I mean, it's nice, but he doesn't seem to be okay anymore, and there's resentment building up. It's because there was a massive miscommunication that happened because they didn't have this style of communication going on where he repeated it and it was clarified. Because when he repeated it and knew that she was saying, I just don't want you to play golf every weekend, but by all means, you can play golf some, just not every weekend, he was totally cool with that. But his first time when he repeated it, you could see on his face he wasn't cool with giving up golf, which is totally understandable. But that happens all the time. When we say things to each other in passing, or when we state something and the other person just walks on off and doesn't let you know that they were upset, or they misheard you. It's amazing how many couples fall into unhealthy communication just by misunderstanding what the other person was saying. So I want you to get this skill down and I want you to practice it. Here's what I want you to do. This is going to be, I have a bunch of questions for you to do that will help you to practice this skill along with have some conversations that are going to be really good. Another thing that I want to encourage you to do is use this skill to give daily compliments. Right now, in the middle of COVID, in the middle of quarantine, and with everything getting worse instead of better, this is a perfect time for you to be really intentional about giving your spouse encouraging words. And so I encourage you to give daily compliments, if not daily compliments, weekly compliments, and use this skill to do it. I also encourage you to have check-ins, and that's one of our questions that we're going to have. I'm going to read off our questions to you just to let you know what I want you to do as a couple. Go through these, talk about them, use this skill that I just showed you. If you have questions, feel free to email me, text me. I'm happy to talk to you. If you come to realize that you just need a third person to be able to help you along a little bit, I am always available on Zoom to sit with you and your spouse and just have a conversation and help you work through this. So I'm available. But here's what I want you to do tonight. I want you to have a conversation about these topics using the skill I just taught you. So the first question is this: how has your communication grown or suffered during this quarantine? Why do you think this has happened? Second question is, what do each of you think you need to work on when it comes to communication? I want you to really evaluate yourself. Not so much pointing the finger, I want you to look inward about yourself. The third question is, what do you wish your spouse would work on? That's the perfect opportunity for you to say something assertive that you need your spouse to work on. Here's what I wish, here's what I need. Use that feeling word with it and practice that skill of repeating. How can you make healthy communication more intentional in your marriage? That's question number 4. When is the best time and way for your spouse to communicate with you? That was question number 5. Question number 6 is, when do you know is definitely the wrong times and ways for your spouse to try and communicate with you? I figured this out in my own marriage. My husband would work all day and I was home with the kids, and I would think about something I wanted to talk to him about, and I might have thought about it all day long. But he didn't even have it on his radar. And when he'd come in the house and I'd bring it up, he'd be like, his point was, he goes, Casey, I just feel like you sideswipe me, you know? And so I know other people have situations like that. There's just times when it is not a good time to communicate. Talk about that. That's question number 6, is just share with each other what are the wrong times and wrong ways to try to communicate with your spouse and have good communication. The last question, number 7, is, when would be a good time for us to have a weekly or monthly check-in? These check-ins should have 2 things that I appreciate that you're doing and 1 thing that I need you to work on. This is great for people who are still working on learning how to be assertive. It's going to cause you to come up with those things, come up with them, come to the time when you're having this check-in, come prepared. Have those 2 things you appreciate and 1 thing that you're going to tell them to work on before you sit down together. Be prepared. But with that, it's going to give you the opportunity to practice this skill. So what I want you to do is I want you to be able to put that right now when you meet and talk about these questions. I want you to put a day and time on the calendar. Pick the day and time, set it, put it in your phone, put an alarm, maybe even an alarm for the day before so you can think about what you want to say during that check-in. But that's going to be vital for you to continue to be intentional during this quarantine time to communicate well. So that is your homework. That's what I want you to work on. Seriously, if you have any questions or need any help, I'm around. My contact information is right here on our webpage. Feel free to contact me. Thank you.